I'm on custom live streaming. It's telling me it's being live streamed.
Okay.
Someone that's not me will need to double check that.
Callie, can you check the live stream?
Yeah, I'll check.
Thanks so much.
Yeah, for some reason, if you're the one with the Zoom, if you go to the page, it just says video unavailable, which is an odd. Like, okay.
Yeah, it looks good.
So I'm going to be around, but I will mute myself and probably not show my video. Unless there's a point where you want me to be like, wow, I can do that. So, okay.
Okay. So before we let everyone in, Kevin, before you came in, Paul and I were talking and said that you two would sort of work out your own timing for Q&A and whatnot, and that I didn't have to keep time for anything, if that's okay with you. The hope is that people will use Slack for questions, and we'll have Isabella monitoring that. I don't know if you need to work out anything about how that works for Q&A, or does that sound okay? Or would you rather have people unmute and ask questions like audibly?
Let's start with the Q&A. If something's unclear and we have to unmute someone, let's do that. But I'm not entirely sure we want to open that floodgate with, I don't know, 200 people.
I agree with that. Okay. Yeah, no, I prefer to not handle muting and unmuting people. So yes, sounds good.
But we are going to want to stick that Slack link in the chat. I don't know if I'm even on the Slack right now.
Oh, you should get on the Slack. Yeah, I will stick the here. This is the message that I'm going to put into the Slack. I mean, into the Zoom chat. So I just threw it in the chat now. It's if you're on the LD4 Slack space, it just means you have to go to 2020-conf. That's the channel.
Yeah.
Okay. That I am. Okay.
Okay. I'm gonna go ahead. Sorry, I'm just gonna hit admit all because it's 11:30. So
yes, and
sorry.
Yeah, go for it. All right. So we're still seeing some people entering the waiting room, but we will get started shortly. The slide that I have up now has links to resources that are helpful, and I'm also sticking information into the chat, perhaps repetitively, to remind you that Slack is where we're entering things like questions for presenters. If you're already a member of the LD4 Slack, you can bypass the invitation and just join the 2023 conf channel, which I will also put into the chat. So we'll get started in just a second. And I encourage you to visit any of the resources in the slide, such as the conference website, which will give you more information about the conference and also the community organization. Okay, so I am letting in a couple more from the waiting room, and I am going to minimize this slide now. And we'll get started. Hi, so welcome to our actual first session of the day. So you are at Hands On with Marva, welcome. So we're going to hear today mainly from Paul Frank. Paul Frank is a cataloging policy specialist in the Policy Training and Cooperative Programs Division at the Library of Congress. The PCC Secretariat is housed at the Policy Training and Cooperative Programs Division, PTCP. And Paul works with the NACO and SNACO components of the PCC. In addition, Paul is a policy and training contact for the Library of Congress BibFrame pilot. In this role, he assists the Network Development and Mark Standards Office, which is the technical lead for the BibFrame pilot, by providing cataloging policy requirements for RDA and by working with the BibFrame pilot participants on topics associated with the cataloging of resources in BibFrame. I am now going to hand this off to his colleague, Kevin Ford, who will also provide some framing about the context of today's talk.
Thanks, Christine. So my name is Kevin Ford. I also work at the Library of Congress, but more importantly for this session, actually, I am technically now a past co-chair of the Linked Data Interest Group of ALA Core. And just to provide everyone, just a little context for the session, as well as a shout out to for ALA Core's Linked Data Interest Group, I wanted to provide this extra detail. Long story short is we at ALA Core Linked Data Interest Group thought about this session for ourselves, and we would just host it. But then we realized that the timing that we wanted to do this was essentially the same as the LD4 conference, and we thought to ourselves, what better way to do it if we made ourselves part of the LD4 conference? This way, anyone who attends LD4 who's not necessarily aware of ALA Core's Linked Data Interest Group becomes aware of us, and you guys can check us out and perhaps consider joining. And I will drop a link for that into the chat. And at the same time, anyone who routinely attends ALA Core Linked Data Interest Group events, if you didn't know about LD4, we're glad you're here. And so with that, let me hand it over to Paul. Paul has been doing all of our training at the Library of Congress for Marva, which is the linked data editor that we use for BibFrame. He's an expert in this. He's also very fun to listen to. So with that, Paul.
Thank you. Thanks, Kevin. And thanks, Christine, for the introduction. So what we're going to do today is look at the external version of Marva, which is the linked data editor that we use in our BibFrame pilot here at the Library of Congress. And I just want to walk through two resources with you and show you how we would describe those resources in Marva and in BibFrame. I'm going to tell you some things that you might not like, but it's reality. So number one, first of all, I guess the most important thing is any work that you do within this external editor, and let me go ahead and send the chat. That's the access to the external editor that we're going to use, and I hope that you will click on it and follow along as I go through the demo. The data that you described there cannot be saved. I mean, you can look at the RDF and you can download the RDF if you want, but there's no underlying data store that will collect all of the descriptions that you create. But in a second, and I'll probably do this again at the end of the presentation, I want to show you what Kevin has done to enable you to pull in instance descriptions from id.loc.gov, which actually contains all of the Library of Congress bibliographic resources in linked data format. So we have that source data as well that you can pull into the external version of Marva and play around with it. But more importantly, and this has been something that has nagged me for years as we've moved into linked data. Ideally, a linked data implementation would be clean and you would start and move forward with linked data implementation. At the Library of Congress, unfortunately, and this is not unique to us, this is at any institution that does cataloging, there's that legacy of MARC that still is nagging at us. And it has forced us to make some decisions that might not be pure linked data friendly decisions, but we cannot let go of that MARC past. We have to, right? No, I'm gonna share the screen in a second, Kevin. I just wanted to give the background of all this. There's some things in Marva that are concessions that needed to be made in order to transition from MARC into linked data. So with that in mind, let me share my screen. And I'm going to point out a couple of those things right off the bat. This is the Marva editor that you'll see in the external version, the one that anyone in this session can access. You'll see on the left-hand side, there is a panel that allows you to check your data, create data, pull in data. There's some help screens here as well. In the central part of the screen are the essential profiles that you'll be using in descriptions. And for today, I'm going to do one monograph, basic monograph, and I want to do one sound recording. And I flipped through the attendees list, and I'm very grateful that I have some music colleagues here who can help me out. So I don't think I've made any huge mistakes in my sound recording cataloging, but it's always nice to have confirmation or have someone there who can help with questions if they come up. So let me send you the resource that we're going to work on together. And I actually made this a view only because I learned the hard way when I did another one of these demos. If I do edit rights to everyone, the form, the Google Doc disappeared in front of my eyes when someone deleted it accidentally. So I'll change the editing. I'll change it to editing rights after the session today. But I just wanted you to look at all the data that's on the form. Now we're going to describe in Marva. Here's another link to the external version of Marva. In this resource, I tried to pick one that was relevant to the GLAM aspect of this conference. Link data for the perplexed librarian. It's a relatively recent resource. ALA Publishing put it out. It's in the series Alex monograph. There's some contribution information here. It's very small. So what I did a little bit further down is list all the bibliographic details. And this is a training tool that has worked really well for me in the past when I'm teaching BibFrame, because we're all used to the flat mark description, right? The flat mark record that has a mishmash of elements that even in RDA and our cataloging standard, it's a mixture of work, expression, manifestation, even item information in the bibliographic description. Well, the same applies for BibFrame. When you're looking at a resource in MARC that you want to express in BibFrame, you have to pull that flatness apart and separate information out. So that's, you might find it quite surprising to see, there are two titles here. There's a work title and a title proper. They're the same. And in a MARC record, you would never even question that. You might not even realize that 245 title in MARC is serving two different purposes, right? It's serving as the work title in RDA and in BibFrame, and it's also serving as the title proper or the instance or manifestation title at the same time. So we have these four agents who are involved in the contribution to this resource. Their role as authors. They're the highest level of RDA contribution. It's in the series Alex monograph, and the imprint data is here. Okay, now what's going on with this color coding? If you can see the color coding, blue color coding represents BibFrame work information. So work title, preferred title, if you want to use the RDA term, is BibFrame work. Contribution is at the work level. Series related work, right? Series are works too. Is at the work level. The title proper goes to instance. So it's in a different, I put it in a different color. The imprint data related to the manifestation or the instance, different color. Supplementary content, contents, subjects, all of these are work level information. Here's an odd one, call number. I put that in green because technically that goes to an item. And we're not going to look at items today, but I just wanted to give you this information because one of the shortcuts or the concessions, if you want to call it a concession, I think that's a better word for it, that we've had to make in the BibFrame pilot is to take advantage of this complete call number in the work description. And when we get to the input part of this, I'll explain more about that. Then we have the extent and an identifier for the ISBN. Okay, so let's go back to our external version of the editor. If you have that resource, next to you, or maybe split screen, that's what I'm going to try to do. Actually, I'm looking at it on a piece of paper here. Let's go in and start describing this resource. This is a monograph. I'm going to click on monograph. The first thing that you see is the work level description. We've already assigned a preliminary identifier for this BibFrame work here. It's automatically generated. You can see it might go up the screen just a little bit, but we already have a unique BibFrame identifier assigned. Now, for creator of work, I'm not here to teach cataloging, but everyone who works with RDA should know that the old AACR2 principle of 3 rule had went away with RDA. So even we have 4 creators. So we're going to actually need to provide access points for all 4 of those as creators of the work. Now, here is a concession. Concession number 1. You'll see creator of work here. I cannot put all 4 creators here. I can only put 1. If I scroll down a little bit more at the work level, you see other contributors. Why are these separated? If all 4 of these agents are contributing at the same level, it's because of MARC. And when you have a MARC bibliographic record, you have a 1XX, non-repeatable, and you have 7XXs. And they contain, the 1XX, the 7XX can contain contribution at the same level, but you can only have 1 primary contribution. In a pure linked data implementation, this should be irrelevant. In fact, I wish in MARC in many ways that we didn't even have the 1XX concept, because that seems very dated and very tied to card catalog still, right? And we're not in card catalog environment anymore. But that's the reason we're going to have to separate out these 4 agents who are involved with this resource. So the first one, since we're cataloging according to LC, Library of Congress standards and PCC standards, we have to use the LC name authority file for our contributors. We have to search them. If they don't exist, if we can't find authority records for them, we're going to have to create authority records, create a new one. So the first name is Carlson, Scott Carlson. So let's just, you can key it in. Okay, now we're sort of, what do you see here? Well, catalogers like to look at authority records. Just seeing the authorized access point is not going to be enough. So you want to see if one of these Scott Carlsons is the person responsible for this resource. Let's take a look. Here is, I clicked on the first one and I see a sort of a knowledge panel that comes up based on the authority record that's underlying this authorized access point. We can see field of activity, libraries, education hires, sustainability. Thanks, Ed. Yeah, no, I'm going to ask my colleague Matt about that. I noticed that this morning when I was playing around with it. It's not intentional at all. Occupation, authors, journalists. This is what catalogers need to have in order to show the relationship between an agent and a resource. Is this the correct Scott Carlson? I'm going to say it probably is, but just to be safe, let's look at some of these others. This person, the second one that has a birth date in the authorized access point, is involved in digital media, journalism, authorship. Journalist, probably not the right person to link to this resource. The one from 1983 looks like someone involved in the music discipline. Not as much information here, but I still think there's enough here for me to say this is not the one. The math teacher, probably not. this is, I said I'm not going to teach cataloging, but this is what catalogers do, right? They have to make a decision. I'm going to say that this is the correct Scott Carlson for the resource that I'm describing. So I've highlighted it. I can click on add selected, and then I want to show his role. What is the relationship that this Scott Carlson has to this bib framework? He's the author, or this person is the author. I don't want to assume gender. So, oh, okay. Thank you, Jeanette. Thank you. So let's go back. Let's go back to that. Let's start again. This one, let's double check. Yep, there it is. No, thank you. Thank you. Very good. Very good. So good catalogers in the audience today. I don't think it's wrong. I don't think it's wrong. In fact, let me double look, take another look at the. Yeah, the one this one has been described in BibFrame already, and it does have the 1983 date. So that's our correct author. It was easy to change it. Did you see what happened when I picked the first one, the Scott Carlson, and those of you in the as attendees pointed out that it really is not the correct one. All I did was I could have clicked on change. I clicked on the X and delete it. But now we have the right one, and we can leave the author. His role in this resource is author. I didn't plan it. I just didn't prepare well enough. But this is real life, right? You know what I mean? If when I see a perfect demo, I think, what is that person missing? I like the interaction. So this is great. Okay, now second mark concession. We're at the work title now. Non-sort character count. Non-sort character count. Well, this is a misnomer in one way, because if we are cataloging under RDA standards, which we are, preferred title of work automatically excludes the any initial articles or non-character counts. Why is that? Because of MARC. Because we do not have in the 240, where we would put the work title, a non-filing indicator. So we just automatically have to delete or omit any initial articles. So what's the name of our resource here as the work title, preferred title of work, link data for the perplexed. Okay. Oh no, I put it in the wrong area. At least I can catch my own mistake this time. Okay, so there were no non-filing, and I wouldn't have even used them. It's irrelevant here because preferred title automatically, according to our policy statement in RDA, says you don't even take that into account. So here's our title. Most people who are new to Marva, new to BibFrame, are going to say, "Ooh, I don't know what to do with." Shouldn't I put a period here? You know, should I put a slash? But wait a minute, I can't put the statement of responsibility here. Punctuation is irrelevant. Don't worry about it. You don't need to put anything here. Okay, so far we have our first author. We've got a title. What comes next on here? And by the way, I want to mention as I go through this, that Matt Miller, who is I believe attending today, is the developer of Marva. He has created this amazing linked data editor tool. But not only that, he works with the BibFrame pilot participants at the Library of Congress on this iterative development. And there's so many different ways that you can display data and the profiles on Marva. Now, I'm just using the default, but some catalogers in the pilot say, you know, this is a lot of scrolling to go through just to describe one resource. So Matt has come up with a way to compress some of this blank space, and you can even you can just have lines of data, or you can have a spreadsheet, like a spreadsheet look at the data. But for today's, as I said, for today's presentation, I just want to use the basic one, but you're able to play around and make it work for you in the best way possible. You'll see that that it is quite a long screen when we have work and then instance appended to that, and then even item, if you want to get into the item description. So as we go along now, after we put the title, if I look back on the bibliographic details, the only other subject information, I'm sorry, the only other work information that we need to get into this part of the profile are the other three contributors or authors, the other three names, the series title, and the subject information. So remember, since we are using RDA, a lot of this data here is not core. This is not RDA core data. Form, genre, the form of the work. Well, it's hard to say what this work is. I mean, this is one that's not in our next one, in the next demo, when we have a music sound recording. We definitely can consider form, genre, but this is somewhat irrelevant for this work. It's not a government publication. Date of work, don't confuse this with date of publication. Date of work is the date that this work was created, and it's an unfortunate substitution that takes place in RDA, and even in MARC, where you will allow a publication date, a manifestation attribute in RDA to be a substitute for a work attribute. So you can generally safely assume that the date of publication is actually the date that the work was written, but we don't know that for sure. This work could have been written 10 years ago and it just finally got to publication, period. But that is a type of substitution that catalogers will make. And it's a little slippery, but it's just expedient. But it's not a core element. To give the date of the work is not core. So I'm just going to leave it out. Place of origin of work, not the publication place. Where was this work created? We don't know. It was in somebody's office at the beach. I don't know. I'm not going to go searching for that data. Geographic coverage of content. This is not relevant because we have, that the GAC, the geographic area code information is based on subjects. And when we get to the subjects here, we're just going to have basic, straightforward LCSH headings with no geographic subdivision. Anyway, I think you get the idea as I go down here. Now let's get to the those three other contributors. And we're going to search these just like we did the Scott Carlson one. The first one, or the next one, is Corey Lampert. I like this because I've got only one hit, and this is catalogers just crossing their fingers. I hope this is the one. Sure enough, look at this, the resource, the 670, if you're thinking Mark, the source consulted that generated this authority record is the resource that we're cataloging. So it's a clear choice here. So this is our next contributor. Notice that it's in BibFrame, we're calling this contribution. So you see contributors. It's a slippery slope here because contribution in RDA is something much different. But in BibFrame, an author is a contributor. So that's the reason that this says other contributors. So we can select Corey as our second creator. Now, what do we do for the next two? Well, we have an option. We can go over here. We can add a new box for the third one. I think that's the way that most participants would add a new box, because we have to keep, remember, linked data is all about uniqueness, one-to-ones. If you have more than one predicate in an RDF statement, you're probably ending up with a blank node, because you can't connect one to many in linked data. It's got to be one-to-one. And that's why we're ending up with having to repeat these. But it would be the same in MARC, right? You wouldn't put all the three other authors in 1700 field. So the next one we have is Darnell Melvin. And I like this too. You would have thought I chose this resource because of these last three. This is, again, the source consulted is the same as the resource. Why would these authority records be in the file if we're cataloging this for the first time? Well, remember, the LC NACO authority file is built by all PCC members. So someone else at another institution might have already cataloged this resource. We're just cataloging it here for the first time, but we're taking advantage of that cooperation among PCC where someone else has done the work on the authority record for us already. So we can select this one and put author. Then we go to our last one, which was Anne Washington. Now, this one, that sounds like, you know, when you have a common sounding name, I start to get a little bit freaked out, but let's see what we got here. Spell it wrong. Spelled it wrong. Oh, nice. I didn't get as many as I thought. So hopefully, yep, here we go. Someone else has done the work for us already. That was a close call. You don't like to deal with the Tom Joneses of the world or the Smiths of the world. Smith gets overused, but believe me, there are thousands of surnames that are so common that I love it when I'm reviewing NACO records and I see a very unusual surname. I think, oh, this is going to be a piece of cake. Okay, so what is Anne's role here? Author. Okay, what other work elements do we have in this resource? Well, we're down to the series. And I want to show you something that has the legacy of the past hovering over it. In 2006, the Library of Congress stopped tracing series. Now, that's cataloger jargon. Tracing means providing controlled access to series. And the Library of Congress just would transcribe a series statement as it appeared, and we didn't worry about making sure that it was under authority control. That is still our policy, but as part of our experimentation in BibFrame, we are allowing catalogers, if they want, to take advantage of all the work that PCC has done. Because when the Library of Congress stopped tracing series in 2006, PCC picked up the slack and they continue to trace series. And so these authority records for series are out there and they're so valuable for linked data. If you just transcribe something without making sure it's under some kind of identifier control, you're losing information. It's there, but you're not taking full advantage of that information. So what we are allowing catalogers to do is transcribe the series, and this was a Lex monograph. And then optionally search the series to see if it has been established in the name authority file as a series authority record. And let's see. And fortunately, I do know for a fact that this is a pretty well-known series, a Lex monograph. So it's a hub in BibFrame, and I'm not going to go into hubs. Maybe we can twist Kevin Ford's arm to give us a hub demo at some point, talk about hubs, because that's a whole nother part of BibFrame that it's not relevant to today's discussion, but it's extremely interesting. So let's pick this Lex monograph. And so we've actually provided an important link here. Yeah, that's a really good point about the where this information goes. if we transcribe this series, it technically is at the instance level, right? Because you're taking it right off of the resource. But if you are providing a related work entry, as we're doing by linking to the hub, then it rises to the level of the work. And we talked quite a bit about this in the pilot, and we thought for cataloger simplicity, we should keep them together. They're split in mark 498XX, you know, they're split there, but we thought we would just keep them together. And it's somewhat of another one of those concessions that we are making. Okay, now I want to spend a little bit of time, and I'm gonna probably do less work in the instance area because that's basically transcription. But I was more interested in showing the linkages that we can make in the oh, okay, thank you. Yeah, no, the I'll do that going forward, Christine. Yeah, I'll repeat. I was reading questions in chat and I'm answering them without reading them out, but I'll do that from now on. I want to go up to subjects, because here's another concession, and I think this is the one that bothers me personally the most, and it's about how we deal with subjects in linked data in BibFrame descriptions. Now, according to our bibliographic details here, we have two straightforward, and I have to say, linked data friendly terms to describe this for the aboutness of this resource. One is linked data. And now you can see this is a slightly different view of searching than we saw when we were looking for contributors and the 4 authors in this resource. At the top of this search, you can see LCSH, NAF, indirect geo, works, and hubs. So our target here is basically LCSH. But remember, most jurisdictions in the name authority file are valid for use, and personal names are valid, and well, almost any entity in the name authority file is valid for use as a subject. So we need to have the option to search both LCSH and the NAF when we are describing the subject of a resource. Now, it's relatively straightforward when we do linked data, because look at this green check. What this has done is identified an LCSH heading, authorized heading for linked data, and that's the topic of our work. So I can click on that and say, great, I've got that as the topic, and I'm going to click on add over here, and it provides that access point. This is perfect for linked data. It's a one-to-one. It's not a complex LCSH string. We have a second LCSH string. This one is semantic web. So let's search that. And again, we have a one-to-one here, semantic web. It's from LCSH. We can add it to our description. Now, I wanted to show you just to illustrate the workarounds that have to be done when you're dealing with legacy practices, not only just mark, but the way controlled vocabularies work. Let's pretend that in this resource, we wanted to bring out geographic subdivision information and then add a topical subdivision on top of it. So what we're going to do is create a complex LCSH string. The way to do it is, and Matt Miller has done amazing work on this, but my feeling is that are we allowing past practice to dictate how we move forward? And let's look at this. The one that I wanted to use was linked data. We know that exists, right? We can take that as a topic. If you look at the authority record for linked data, you know you may subdivide it geographically. Let's take, just for the demo, this has nothing to do with the resource itself. Let's say that we want to subdivide to the city of Chicago, because this resource was published by ALA. ALA is in Chicago. So what we want to do is put in MARC terms, a subfield Z for Illinois, a subfield Z for Chicago. Where do you find that information in MARC? It's actually in the authority record for Chicago, Illinois. The heading, it's a name authority record, is Chicago qualified by ILL. The geographic subdivision form is in the 781 field. So what Matt has done here, and so there's not a separate record for Illinois, Chicago. It's derived from the heading for Chicago, Illinois. So in the builder here, Matt has enabled an indirect geographic subdivision. And we know that the indirect form is through the state and then to the city level. So here are all the 781 entries from different authority records, not only in the name authority file, but in the subject authority file as well, because their subjects, their geographic names in LCSH as well as in the NAF. But this is the one we want. This is not an authorized heading. This is just the way this entity is displayed as geographic subdivision. And then finally, let's add on to give a topical subdivision testing. Now, oh, I see what I did. So I'm searching for the topical subdivision testing. Nothing's coming up because I'm still on indirect geo up at the top. So let's go to LCSH NAF. And now we're back into where we want to be. But be careful, because this is something that MARC allows us to overlook. Because when we're describing subjects in a MARC record, we're just keying in information. Why are there two testings here? Well, one is a topical LCSH heading, and the other one is the subdivision, the topical subdivision. It's important to select the correct one. And as I say, sort of in frustration, artificial intelligence will never be able to figure out how to apply LCSH correctly. It's so complicated. It does not have consistent rules. It's practices over time. So you have to depend on your knowledge of the tool of LCSH and how it works to come up with the correct strings. So I've added that as a topical subdivision here, and that's how I would get that into Marva. To me, and I know there's a lot of people who disagree with me very strongly on this, a faceted approach to describing subjects is so much better for linked data than having to go through this convoluted process to get a string of data that isn't under authority control by itself. Each element is, but that entire string is not even under authority control. So it's a issue that I think is something that our community needs to look at in great detail as we move forward towards linked data. The classification, that's pretty easy. I'm not going to look it up, but I wanted to point out one other concession here, Z666.73.L56. That's actually part of the L56 stands for linked data in the schedule. So that technically is part of the classification number, but that should be all that BibFrame wants in the work. But because we need to get that 050, that call number, complete call number in the MARC record, if we're generating a MARC record from this BibFrame description, catalogers in the pilot give the complete call number information or the additional information here so that the 050 can be generated. Okay, everyone, I'm watching the clock and I know I'm not going to spend as much time on the second resource. I think this first one is the one that I wanted to spend the most time on. But now when we get to we're done with the work. Yeah, I've covered every work element, every work attribute, but now I'm at the instance. Now the non-sort character count comes into play. We didn't have a non-filing value here, but this is where you would enter the number of digits, that just like you would put in the second indicator of a 245, how many digits or how many characters are being disregarded. Main title is the same as the work title. Statement of responsibility, I would just transcribe what was on the title page with those 4 persons, those 4 agents' name. Didn't have an addition statement. This is something I wanted to point out here, provision activity. What is going on here? What is this? Why do we have 2 from 008, 2 from 008, 26X, 26X, 26X? Well, because in Mark, we give this data twice, once in a controlled way, not a precise way, but a controlled way. When you think of the 008, you give a value for the place of publication that only goes in the US to the level of the state, doesn't go below that. And you give a date in a controlled way. In the 264 area of the description, you are transcribing information that actually is quite important for the identification of the resource, but it's not controlled in any way. So we have a mixture of controlled and uncontrolled here. But we need to have all of this data in our description so that we can generate MARC from it. And if we have a MARC record that we bring into Marva, we want to have a way to bring the 008 values as well as the 26X values. So that's why catalogers here will give both. They're satisfying the 008, they're satisfying the 26X in MARC. Under what, you know what, I'm going to leave that off. I could go on for hours about this. I wanted to talk a little bit about what we're doing with non-Latin data, but I think I'm going to leave that aside for now. We've done some pretty amazing things with romanization, but that could be a whole nother presentation. So I'm going to leave that out. I'm going to say that we are, well, there was the extent information that I could put in, the identifier, the ISBN, but this is basically just entering data. So I'm not going to do that with you all. I just really wanted to focus on the work information. Okay, I need some advice from either Kevin or Christine. Should I try to answer questions now, or should I just go on to the next resource?
My inclination is to go on to the next resource. Between myself, Matt, and Jody, we've been handling most of those questions.
Perfect, perfect. Okay, everyone, let's go back to our Marva opening screen, and with my apologies to music catalogers, although as I said, I don't think I did this totally wrong, but I wanted to pick a resource that was just recently published. And this will be our sound recording. This is a, hold on. This is an audio CD by PJ Harvey, and just came out this month, as far as I know. Very small. The music catalogers struggle with this, having to read these. You know, the CD for a sound recording is considered the chief source, right? So you got to really rely what's on that tiny little CD. You don't have the elegance of a title page print resource. But here, same thing. I went through the same steps that I did for that first resource. The work title, the title proper. One is at the instance, one is at the work, but you're going to have to put them both in because they're both totally different values. They represent different things, even though the value is the same. Contribution, PJ Harvey. We've got imprint that goes in the into the instance information. Form here, extremely important. This is where form comes into play. This is rock music. And then we have different types of identifiers that are common with sound recordings, the extent, contents, summary. Okay, what are we going to do here? We're going to go to Marva, This time we're going to pick audio CD. Now, for the most part, it looks the same. You wouldn't recognize this as a different profile until you get into the information that is unique to sound recordings, because this is a different profile. It will have values that you would not see in the monograph. But at the work level, for the most part, works are works. It's when you get into the instance that a lot of the information is different. So what do we have here? Now, this is something I didn't show in the last one because we just had persons. If I put PJ Harvey in here, PJ Harvey is a corporate name. It's going to come up. But if I wanted to filter and be perfectly sure, oh, didn't I spend the second one? Oh, I sent it only to Kevin. So sorry. That was my fault. I was responding to something that Kevin had sent. Yeah, here we go. Okay. So PJ Harvey is a corporate name. So there it is, musical group. It came right up. No question here. If you're a music cataloger, you might have knowledge of other groups that could be similar. You want to double check to make sure, but I'm pretty sure I'm confident with this choice. Now, here's an interesting relationship. This group has two levels of relationship. This group composed it, and it performed it. Now, see, this is where in Mark you would be allowed to give two relationship designators in one access point. And you should be able to do that in Marva. It's been sort of buggy today because this morning when I did it, it worked, but right now it's not. So what are you going to do with that other relationship designator as performer? Well, you could repeat the name PJ Harvey as other contribution and show the role there, or you could ideally put it here in the same box. But in a way, now that I think about it more, it didn't occur to me until now. From a linked data perspective, it's probably better to repeat the corporate name with the different relationship designator because that's the one-to-one principle in play. Okay, let me, since you have the resource, I'm going to just say, why don't you all describe that resource and on your own time? And if you have any questions about it, I'm happy to, you can email me and I might be able to help you with some questions. And I'm sure there's some questions that that everyone hasn't gotten to. In closing on this one and leaving it for you to do like on your own, the important information here is this form. Music catalogers have unfortunately dealt with having to use LCSH, which is a topical vocabulary to represent forms. And it's such an entrenched practice that it's going to be hard to pull it apart. But I'm looking forward to the day when music resources will be able to use genre terms rather than LCSH terms, because truly that's what they should be, genre terms. And so I'm searching form genre here, not LCSH. LCSH is further down on the list. But if I put rock music here, you can see, I click on it, you can see that it is from the LCGFT. It's a perfectly valid heading. I found a description of this resource in OCLC. We don't have it in our catalog at LC, it's in OCLC. And it did have the rock music genre, but then in addition, it had the LCSH rock music, or rock music, which can be subdivided chronologically. So just to give it context within the realm of the discipline of rock music, but I didn't add that here. My music colleagues will give me a lashing for not doing that. You'll see here there are other attributes, elements that are unique to music performance, medium of performance, very long input area, serial numbers, opus numbers, thematic index numbers. This just shows you how each profile in marva is based on cataloger input over time from the subject specialists in those formats, helping us come up with ways to allow them to describe resources that they're responsible for in BibFrame. Okay, please, if you'd like, please do work on that. And I can't promise that I'm always prompt on responses, but I think I'm a better teacher than a cataloger, so I always like to teach. What I wanted to show you before we close, and maybe Kevin has some final comments, is some amazing work that he's done. Now, remember I said that the external version of Marva doesn't allow you to save descriptions. So you might think, well, I'm stuck just doing original input, but that's not true. What Kevin has done is taken id.loc.gov, or we call it sometimes id.loc.gov. And at the top of the, let me give you the link for that. I bet a lot of you already know about this. But this is a big linked data site that the Library of Congress maintains. All resources in our catalog, not just ones that BibFrame pilot participants have created, but the entire catalog has been converted to linked data. And we have the two high-level abstractions of work and instance here that you can search in Marva. I'm sorry, in id.loc.gov. So let me show you an example. Now, it's important if you do this to go to the instance level in id.loc.gov. And I want to search for a related resource. This is not one that we worked on today, but it has linked data in its title. Linked data, structured data. In the web. So here is a BibFrame instance. For all I know, this has never appeared in Marva because, as I said, our entire database was converted to linked data. So this could be a MARC record that sits in our MARC bibliographic file that was automatically created or transcribed or generated a linked data description. Let's say you wanted to play with this in Marva. You can do that by going to the bottom of the screen here, and you'll see load to Marva bibframe.org demo. And this is what Kevin has done to every instance description in id.loc.gov. So if I click on that there, I'm going right to that external version of Marva, and you can start out by putting any kind of code that will identify your work. And then by selecting a profile, it will pull that data into Marva for you to play around with. Right away, you see some things. Colon structured data on the web. I don't think this is part of the preferred title. I would expect to see this at the instance level, maybe not at the work level, because this is other title information and that's not part of preferred title in RDA. So I'm not saying that all of these are perfect, but the reason I wanted to point this out to you is to look to the future. And if we can go to a day or look forward to a day when we are not looking back at MARC and we can use linked data in a pure sense, then I think we'll finally be able to say that it is going to be a success. And I not only want to think about the day where we can describe resources in RDA and BibFrame without the legacy of MARC, but any type of data model Marva could be used for any type of data model. It doesn't need to be BibFrame. It doesn't need to be Mark, but this tool is so powerful that it's going to allow us to do things that we can only just imagine in our heads right now. And I'm looking forward to the day when we're in a BibFrame environment, but maybe different data models created globally could be used in this same type of linked data editor that we have in Marva. Okay, everyone, that is sort of a rushed demonstration of 2 resources. Please play around with it. You have access to all of our instance data, work data in id.loc.gov. You can pull it in, do whatever you want, add things, delete things, if you'd like to become comfortable with what our BibFrame pilot participants have been doing for 7 years now. It's a long time, but we've made some pretty amazing progress. Okay, Kevin, I don't know if you had any final words, or maybe Christine, or maybe there's something I need to do before we end.
I was just going to say thanks to you, Paul. Thanks to the audience for all the questions. If there's something that hasn't been answered, feel free to email Paul or myself or Jody or Matt, of course. And just 2 last things. Again, the idea of this session actually began as the genesis of this was ALA Linked Data Interest Group. If you'd like to join, I just dropped the link into the chat. We welcome you. Otherwise, everyone's got a short break, and the next session begins in about 30 minutes at LD4.
Yep. Thanks for this. This is wonderful. And yeah, we've got a 30-minute break. The next session is at 1 Eastern time, and it's the present and future of libraries through Wikimedia, which is going to be awesome. All right. Thanks for this.
And thanks, everybody. Have